Hey, Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahawashi, Bahashem, HaKodash, double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, love, salutations, and blessings to the house of David, which is the elect. And just coming back with some, quick any news update. Hearing about this so-called ceasefire, right, that was, struck between Iran and the U.S. However, in light of recent events, you have the 48ers, going rogue and bombing Beirut of Lebanon, and now there's a lot of tension, right? A lot of over talking or mis information rather from both sides, saying that what has been agreed upon is not actually what is taking place, right? And you have the 48ers, right? Netanyahu basically said that they're going to continue to strike Lebanon because Lebanon was not a part of the agreement of ceasefire. Trump came out and said that initially he agreed to Lebanon being part of the ceasefire, right, or last night, but now he came out and said that Lebanon was not a part of the ceasefire. And the Secretary of Press, she just reaffirmed that Lebanon wasn't a part of the ceasefire. And Iran came out and said if Lebanon is not a part of the ceasefire, then they're not going to uphold the ceasefire. And I believe they actually said that they closed the Strait of Hormuz because of what Israel, the 48ers, did in Lebanon. So here, this is a statement coming from the Iranian parliament speaker, right? And he says the U.S. and Israel, or the Israelis, violated the ceasefire agreement. In such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable. Now let's read it here, right? It says, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a, quote, workable basis on which to negotiate. Now that is what Trump came out and tweeted last night. And the main framework for the talks. However, 3 clauses of this proposal have been violated so far. So within, a matter of 12 hours or so, you've already had the proposal, right, violated. It says the first one, non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also explicitly referred to and declared as an, quote, immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions effective immediately. So in the post that this Prime Minister of Pakistan came out with, which both sides agreed to, he stated that there's going to be an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including in Lebanon. And then you had earlier today the largest bombing, right, on Lebanon by the 48ers. Okay, so the ceasefire, the fire isn't ceasing. Okay, and this is ultimately what you have to understand through, right, the word of the Lord, right, understand through the scriptures that all of these things that are being done is by the performance and the will of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahawashi. Right? We can't stress that enough because you can see something happening, on the surface as far as men, right, and what they are doing, but understand that it is the will of the Lord that's going to stand, right? Counsel, and this is something I refer to, I think, in the book of Proverbs, that you have to, always keep in mind, always consider. Proverbs 19, verse 21, there are many devices, which means ideas or plans, right, thoughts, in a man's heart, meaning his what? His lab, which is his mind, right? Nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord, that shall stand. So what the Lord counsels, what he purposes, right? Many are the plans of a person's heart, right? Or here in the ESV, it says, many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. So keeping that in mind, understanding that we already know, right, the Lord has blessed us with, insight on his counsel, insight on his purpose, insight on his plan, his determination. So knowing that the Lord is determined to gather these nations, he's determined to, have them drawn into the valley of Jehoshaphat, ultimately to send his son back, Yahawashi, right, to destroy all of these armies, know that even if there is a proposal, right, of a ceasefire, that ultimately, right, in the final, right, what would finally, or not finally, what would ultimately happen is that these nations are going to, continue to fight. All right, because remember, the scripture says that Yahawashi is going to return while these nations, right, while the world is in the midst of a fight. Okay, so the fire won't cease until Yahawashi gets his peace. All right, that might be the title of this, right? It's the fire won't cease until Yahawashi gets his peace, because as he said in the book of Luke, that he has come to send fire upon the earth. Right? Let's go that. Luke chapter 12, verse 49. I am come, red letter, to send fire on the earth. And what will I if it be already kindled? Right? Reading that, it says, I have come to set the world on fire, and I wish it were already burning. See? He wished it was already burning. So when he returns, it is going to be burning. And he's going to bring fire as well, fire from heaven. So reading back here, all right, the second point, it says the entry of an intruding drone into Iran's airspace, right? Because I think Isfahan, if I'm not mistaken, or Mardin Fars province, there was bombings that was happening earlier, a few hours ago, while the ceasefire was in place. So there was an intrusion of a drone into Iran's airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lar in Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting any further violation of Iran's airspace. Point 3, denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. Now, the very, quote, workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began. In such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable. See? It's unreasonable because they've already spoken and came out and said that they're going to take Iran's nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment, that they're not going to have the ability to enrich uranium. So these are things that's all been said, by the Trump administration and by Netanyahu. So with that being in mind, this is clearly, to be seen that this ceasefire is very, very unstable, right? And it is very clear that it won't last long. Now, the purpose of the reason why the ceasefire has taken place, that remains to be seen. But knowing how these devils work, right, and as this guy, as it says in his first paragraph right here, the deep historical distrust we hold toward the U.S. stems from its repeated violations of all form of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been repeated once again. And you get to a point where you see these Israelites, and you realize these heathens are stupid, right? They're very, very stupid. Now, of course, they know that they're fighting against a adversary that does have more capabilities, right, militarily against them. So they may, want to proceed with caution. But for them to even have in their mind that it's even a possibility that this devil could be trusted, right, not to violate, could be trusted to keep his word, goes to show you just how base these heathens are. All right, and this is why, according to the scripture, it says what? Never trust thine enemy. See? And we know very, very well the characteristics and the nature of Esau Edom. He is the serpent in the garden, right? He is, the man that sold his birthright but wasn't going to uphold, his part of the deal, right? And all throughout history, it's been seen time and time again how Esau lies, right? He is as Yahawashi said, he is the father of lies, and there is no truth in him. Okay, but these Persians, they're going to find out, right? And this third time might be the time where they turn into that wild boar, right? As it says in the book of 2nd Ezra, the 16th chapter. Okay, because they've been saying how they have been, restraining themselves in their attacks, but this violation, which once again hasn't even been 24 hours into the ceasefire, and it's already shown to be problematic, it's shown to be, violated. Something could potentially take place to where they just say, F it, and, go all out, right? Once again, as the scripture says, turning as that wild boar. Let me get that in 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter. Let's get to that point. It says, 2nd Ezra chapter 15, verse, where is it at? Yeah, verse 30. It says also the Carmenians, which are the Persians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as wild boars of the wood, And with great power shall they come and join the battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. In this scripture, the Assyrians is symbolically representative of America. Okay, so the Carmanians is going to, the vision that Esdras had was the Carmanians will go raging in wrath as a wild boar. As a matter of fact, I believe there was just a article that came out. Look at that. U.S. announces thousands of Marines and ground forces will continue to be deployed in the Middle East. The war is definitely not over, and Iran should not have signed ceasefire. Right? Why are you still sending Marines? Why are you still sending ground forces? This is all just something, just to have a pause to give the America some time to be able to continue to build up their military assets. But they're showing that they're still moving right in the direction of war. Right, they're still moving in the direction of escalation, and that's because that is what the Lord's will is right, for these things to escalate and to continue to build up to where World War III pops off. Slide to 1 second. All right. So meanwhile, today, right, it could be happening now or in a couple hours. I'm not exactly sure. But it says President Donald Trump will be discussing the potential withdrawing the United States from NATO this afternoon with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. See, so the Lord is working in the midst, man, because this is what leads to, right, if this potentially does happen. But we do know, according to Scripture, that there's going to be a division, a divide, right, between the beast and the horde, right, the horde being America and the beast being the conglomerate nations of NATO. All right, so the fact that you could potentially have Trump speaking about withdrawing from the United States, which I believe, according to Congress, the law, right, you need Congress to approve. 2/3 of Congress has to approve Trump doing this. But we've seen how Trump has moved, right, sidestepping, done things without congressional approval. So, this is something just to keep an eye out on as well. But showing you how everything is moving in the direction of prophecy being fulfilled, biblical prophecy being fulfilled. Because at the time where this war is escalating and World War III is, taking off, you don't see America and NATO, joining forces and becoming stronger. You're seeing this alliance become weaker, right? Which would lead into, like I said, Revelation 17th chapter taking place where the beast will hate the horde and shoot her and burn her with fire, right? So let's see. Further details will be released later on the call between Iran's and Saudi foreign ministers, right? Netanyahu says Iran's nuclear material will be taken out of the country, either through an agreement or by resuming the war. Yeah, and if you listen to Netanyahu's, speech he gave today, he basically, was saying that, look, we agreed to this, to the pause, right, of stopping right now, but we know that we're going to still fight, right? He said the finger's still on the trigger, and as he says right here, the nuclear material is going to be taken out. And it's not going to be by an agreement, because the Iranians just said that their nuclear enrichment program is not up for debate, right? It's not up for agreement. So the only way that he could potentially have this happen is by resuming the war. So what does that show you? That the war is still on the war path. All right. Let's see. Breaking Russia says it condemns U.S.-Israeli attempt to destabilize Iran in the strongest possible terms. Russia, being allied with Iran, we know, according to Scripture, what that's going to lead to, right? Russia being a guard unto them, and then, bringing troops down into the region of the Middle East, so-called Middle East, which will have Russia troops and American troops actually engage in physical combat, right? We already see America sending ground troops over there. So all of these things are, taking place as we speak. Let me see. Here. Let's see this one. Just because there was an interesting verbiage. Iran rages that the U.S. already in violation of 10-point ceasefire as White House declares total victory, right? So Iran rages, lines up with what we read here. Also, the Carmanians raging in wrath shall go forth as wild boars. So just as the prophets wrote it, because the prophets saw it, right? They saw the future, and the Lord gave them the vision, gave them the mouth to speak his prophecies. Those things are going to come to pass as they are written. As Scripture says, the Lord's word does not return to him void. Okay? Isaiah 55, verse 11. It says, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Okay? So the Lord already gave the word, and he commanded it to be written. And we are in a generation, we are in a time where these prophecies shall speak. So what is written is what's going to happen. And this is why you can see similar verbiages, right? Like, as we read here, Iran rages. And it says the Carmanians also shall be raging in wrath. This is why we can take comfort in the scriptures and knowing, comfort in the word of the Lord, knowing that everything is under his control, right? And everything will play out as it is written, all right? And the Lord has blessed us, like I said, with giving us that insight. Let me close this. This is something I found interesting as well. It's coming from Fox News, right? It says, Fox News, none of Trump's stated objectives for the war has been achieved. So how can they claim total victory when even Fox News, which you know Trump loves Fox News, is stating that the objectives that Trump previously stated for the war, none of it has been achieved. So how could this war be over?
But I will say that the president's demands, we have not reached any of those objectives. I have full confidence that the president is going to find some way to make this happen. But he said that we want to dismantle all major nuclear facilities. That has not happened. The end of uranium enrichment on the soil, they're still enriching. The transfer of the enriched uranium stockpiles out of Iran, that hasn't happened. The acceptance of intrusive international inspections, they're still not willing to do that. And they have not suspended their ballistic missiles program. They're still firing them off to stop the production of the long-range missile. That's just a few of them on the president's proposal. The question is the president using this 2 weeks to give our soldiers a break, a rest, to see if we can get this ultimately done? We'll see.
There you go. So, and like I said, that's most likely what they're thinking on their end, that they're trying to, use this time to regroup. But we know ultimately that, hey, it's not even looking like you want to even make it to 2 weeks of a ceasefire, the way things are shaping up. And it's like, and it's because we are in the time of the Lord's judgment. Okay, so I'm gonna get this here. The book of Ezekiel 22, verse 1. Now this is a judgment that was against Israel, but even like as Apostle Tahar says, we're in the time where a lot of these judgments that the Lord put on Israel, during the time of our iniquity while we were in the land, those judgments now are applicable to Esau, Edom, right, in Babylon, right? Because as the scripture says that those curses that came upon us is going to come upon our adversaries. So it says, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, now, son of man, without judge the bloody city. Just like in the book of Nahum, it refers to Nineveh, which prophetically, speaking about Babylon the Great, as the bloody city. See? So it says, yeah, thou wilt show her all her abominations. And this is the position that the men of the Lord are in. Okay, we are laying out the indictments, right? The charges that America has been indicted with, okay, through its bloodshed, through its wickedness, through its robbery, all right, and so on and so forth. It's idolatry, it's witchcraft. It says, then say thou, thus saith Yahweh power, the city sheddeth blood in the midst of it, that her time may come, and maketh idols against herself to defile herself. Thou art become guilty in blood that thou hast shed. And you hear how Trump, and Pete Hegseth talks about the shedding of blood, lethality, right, and violence, and it is going to be dead, right? They just speak about shedding blood as if it's a light thing, as if it's something to be praised and glorified, and especially in the fact that they do it with wicked purposes. Because the Yahawashi is coming, and as the scripture says that the slain of the Lord shall be many, right? He's going to make his sword drunk with the blood, right, of his adversaries. But that is the shedding of wicked, all right? That is the shedding of the evil. That is the shedding of evildoers. That is the shedding to cleanse the land from wickedness, so that righteousness can be put on the earth. But what these devils do is they just shed blood for what? For gain, for being greedy of gain.
Or rather, because it's fun.
Has defiled thyself with thine idols which thou hast made, and thou hast caused thy days to draw near, and are come even unto thy years. Therefore have I made thee a reproach unto the heathen, and a mocking to all the countries. I'm going to get that. And NLT says, you are guilty because of the blood you have shed. You are defiled because of the idols you have made. And we know that this place is full of idolatry. Your day of destruction has come. You have reached the end of your years, right? You have a bound that you cannot pass. Esau is the end of the world. I will make you an object of mockery throughout the world, and everybody's seen that, right? And they, trying to tote like they won the war, but everybody, even your own constituents, right, and your own citizens, are saying that you didn't do anything, right? Even the people that you thought was allied with you, they're saying that you didn't achieve shit. And this is how you know that this isn't done, because Trump's pride is not going to just let him leave being mocked and ridiculed and look as if he, did this for no reason, that there was no benefit from it. Okay, but all that's going to do is draw them closer and closer to their end, because we're in the time of their end. All right, so that's pretty much it. Want to touch on that. Lord willing, is edifying unto the elect, giving all praises to Yahweh, Bashem Yahawashi, Bashem Kakadash, Shalom.
And that's just it. Trump's already mad that the news is portrayed that the U.S. is lost. It's already hurt his pride. Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahawashi, Ba'ashem, Rukakadash. Double honors the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teachers of truth and sincerity. And shout out to the Akims out there in the four quarters of the earth proclaim this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahawashi, Ba'ashem, Rukakadash, Brakatum. So, like everything else, though, as you know, I call it the 3-hour tour. It really wasn't even that long that the ceasefire was breached, because that's what the least of flock would do. They're going to breach the deal anyways. And if this whole thing is paused, that means King Baby's trial continues to go on, so you can see why he was trying to buy more time. Because in war, they can't try him because they're at war. You see how that works. So, like everything else, though, King Baby will never be fully indicted. He's going to keep on pushing this war. The least of flock shall draw them out, as this video goes into. So it was a terrible day in Lebanon yesterday as well, because again, this is the beginning of the ceasefire violations. Over 300 people were killed in this attack, and there's like over 800 trapped because of these goddamn fucking gutter rats, these Amalekites, these bastards dwelling in our land.
Lebanon getting pounded. As you can see here. Israel has now turned its guns on Lebanon, killing hundreds of people, if anyone cares. The largest population of Christians in the Middle East resides in Lebanon. Again, does anybody care that their fellow Christians are getting slaughtered left and right in this country by Israel? So there was supposed to be a ceasefire go in place between Iran and the West, including Israel. But Israel acts like nothing pertains to them. They turn around and they say that this doesn't pertain to Lebanon. We're allowed to turn around and kill anyone we want up here during the ceasefire with Iran. They tried to say that the ceasefire was largely just between the U.S. and Iran, not Israel. Again, Israel just doing whatever they want at any moment, killing anyone they want at any moment. When's it going to stop? Okay? Well, Hegseth and them tried to come on and declare victory again, and everyone's like, that's garbage. You guys are lying through your teeth, left and right. You're obviously looking for a way out of this mess. And they admit that a pause or a ceasefire here only benefits the West, period. It allows them time to reorganize, to reshuffle, and they still have jets flying over Iran as I speak. So they haven't parked, they haven't stopped flying. They're right there. Trump tries to say that they're agreeing to this peace plan, 10-point plan, but they just came out and the White House says that the 10-point plan that they're talking about is not the same as the one they were talking about before. So this whole peace thing is broke already. This ceasefire deal, they're calling it a breach here. There's still talks about Pakistan, but all this stuff is, as I keep saying, it's a carrot on the stick. They keep moving the goalpost over and over again. And at some point here, I feel this is going to escalate into a massive event, whether it's a huge pounding of Iran or a blowback event here in the United States. That's really what I see coming and being the big thing, because people in America are not going to care really one way or another until it truly affects them. And they're going to bring it here. It's by design, I'm telling you, for people that are out there like, oh, it may happen, it may not. Give me a break. Even if they didn't do it, you know who would take advantage of the situation and do it themselves and blame them. So something's coming. And in the meantime, 800 ships trapped in the Persian Gulf. Throughout this whole thing, they opened it for like a second and let some people pay with Bitcoin and then closed it back down. So this whole fiasco still in motion here. Nothing settled. No ceasefire in concrete. And that's where we sit right now. I'll update with more information. Join me for the live stream.
So, like everything else, though. Well, they say that, okay, they're going to put a leash on the Israeli state. Yeah, right. because all they ever do is defend the Israeli state. Oh, and like everything else, Trump doesn't like the fact that Alex Jones has been critical of his main support group that actually, supported him, first and second term. Alex Jones has been a huge time supporter, but now because he's a little critical of some of the things, well, of course, Trump goes on to attack Alex Jones. Multiple media figures said that Alex Jones was targeted because of his support for Donald Trump. Yeah. Of course, I stopped watching him for a while because of his unrelenting support for Donald Trump, which I could see long before he finally had turned. Well, like everything else, so I know it's controlled opposition, but not either way, though. Part of the show, right? It's a shit show, and there's bullshit and there's Trump shit. On Thursday, President Trump lashed out at some of his foundational supporters, including Alex Jones, which was a central figure in Trump's 2016 and 2024 victories, despite being targeted by anti-Trump forces for doing so. And this is what he said. I know why Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones have all been fighting me for years, especially by the fact that they think it would be wonderful for Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terror, to have a nuclear weapon. So he's basically accusing Alex Jones of actually saying, oh yeah, I support Iran getting a nuclear weapon, which that's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Why would they need one when they have missiles that are quite capable of reaching their targets? And they have allies that have nuclear weapons, so there's no need to even acquire any. But since they've been attacked anyways, why not? North Korea already said they're more than willing to give them to them, should they ask. North Korea also said that they would nuke Tel Aviv should anything actually fucking happen. And so did China and Russia. Said they would nuke the Israeli state if anything, any nuclear weapon was ever dropped against Iran, whether it be a neutron bomb or etc., that the Israeli state would be nuked. Okay, so nonetheless, though, Trump just goes on and on. So he calls them troublemakers. They're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free and cheap publicity, like you do. Or I wouldn't have won the presidential election. A landslide MAGA agrees with me, and just gave CNN a 100% approval rating of Trump, not hand flailing fools like Tucker Carlson, who couldn't even finish college. Oh, holy shit! He's really going in on them. Or bankrupt Alex Jones. This is coming from Trump, who say some of the dumbest things and lost his entire fortune, as he should have, for his horrendous attack on the families of the Sandy hoax. These so-called pundits are losers, and they always will be. So he just called Alex Jones a loser. So, pretty funny, huh? Alex Jones responded with Harrison Smith. Trump mad that he's wrong. He's mad he got his set up by the Israeli state. Once a man, twice a child. This is dementia. So this is pretty much it. Harrison Smith, main guy speaking, but Alex Jones actually said this.
It's literally the same talking.
So here we go. Trying here. That
we've heard 10,000 times before. I hope Alex is coming on. I was about to say.
I'm going to go shoot a report, but I'm just wondering if Trump's been held hostage or something. But listen, I'm not mad about this. He's mad that he's wrong. And he's mad he got set up by Israel. And he once a man, twice a child. This is dementia. And so, it doesn't matter. We're going to keep intervening. He knows he was wrong about Iran. He's throwing a fit. And it's okay. We're going to continue to be adults and just respond to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
He needs some theolites.
That's
a high IQ response right there.
Somebody get Donald Trump some methylene blue immediately.
Oh my God.
So, like everything else, that's what Alex had to say, just pretty much so, okay, you want to act like a little spoiled child because you don't like that I didn't support this war, then go right ahead. I'm going to be a man about it, and I'm here calmly. Babylon has reached the limits of its power. DC's retreat and the birth of a new era. Donald Trump declared the start of a new golden age in the Middle East after announcing a ceasefire with Iran. The war, at least for now, has been paused. And while predictions are always risky with the White House, there's at least a chance that the fighting will not immediately resume. That alone matters. A prolonged war would raise risks for everyone, but above all for D.C. For all the bombast coming from the U.S. administration, Babylon has always been deeply uncomfortable with prolonged uncertainty and strategic risk. It is the one thing to threaten, it is another to endure the consequences when threats fail. And, well, just the Strait of Hormuz alone, just totally got to throw a temper tantrum. You open up that fucking strait. You get that fucking strait open. I'll blow you to fucking oblivion. Your whole fucking race is going to fucking die. That's what he said. And like everything else, though, they kept on telling them, well, you ain't going to get anywhere with us. So like everything else, though, the Israeli state is continuing their war, because again, this guy, King Bibi, would, his trial continues as long as the war is paused. The trial continues, so as long as he's got a war going on, they have to pause the trial. And you see his fucking smirk there, too.
This ceasefire was built on the very weak foundation from the very beginnings. The core problem is the simple but the serious. America made a peace deal with Iran, but has no real control or no real willingness to stop its the closest regional partner, Israelis, from doing these things that directly break the logic of that deal. Within just the hour of the ceasefire announcement, Israel's increased its attack on the Lebanon. The timing was not an accident. The timing is not accidental. It showed that the Israelis calculated it could continue the military operation while Washington maintains its diplomatic position. When Iran called the attacks unreasonable, it was not being emotional. It was making the structure points that any honest analyst must acknowledge. You simply cannot negotiate peace in the one room with your diplomatic partner, close ally, the bombing in the next door. The ceasefire did not collapse. It was never given a real environment to the surviving. As long as the Israelis continue military operation in the Lebanon and the Gaza without any meaningful cost, ceasefire did not collapse. It was simply never given the real chance to survive.
So there you have it. It never really existed to begin with. It never even happened, is what they're saying. That is not the agreement we have. President Trump slams Ayatollah charging fees for Hormuz transit. Because like everything else, though, Iran wants to be compensated, and this is a way of being compensated. It's like, okay, well, we didn't charge a toll before, but now, in order for reparations, we need a toll. King Bibi says pursuing Lebanon ceasefire after reports of Trump pressure. So that's what King Bibi says, so he's halting attack. But look at what he did before. Over 250 killed and 1,000 plus wounded in Lebanon from Wednesday's surprise attack by the gutter rats. United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, and even EU condemn. Trump's optimistic still within reach. White House confirms Vice President Vance will lead Kushner-Witkoff delegation to Pakistan, seen as positive in Tehran and Islamabad. So like everything else, though, pretty much, though, Trump announces the end of military operations against Iran by April 15. So he sort of did, but did he? They're going to go back to war. The least the flock shall draw them out, right? Iran's ceasefire allows for Netanyahu's corruption trial to finally resume. So, like everything else, though, the long-withstanding trial will resume in the coming days, according to Reuters. With the lifting of the state of emergency and the return of the judicial system to work, hearings will resume as usual, a statement from the Israeli courts confirms. So he's being held in an Israeli court. This is why he is desperate to save his own ass from getting fucked. And Trump, the child molester, the pedophile, king of Sodom, he's trying to save his ass from getting fucked. Because everybody knows he's a fucking child molester. And, those Epstein files, you got to launch Operation Epstein Fillery, or else I go down, you go down, you know. So that's why he's totally on King Baby's dick. It's like, here we go, let me suck your cock some more. And that's just it, you know. Cum is guzzling right out of the mouth of President Trump, even though he pretends to be strong. But nonetheless, though, you know, both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson are saying that the Israeli state's going to start a nuclear war. And yeah, that would line up with the scriptures, all right, because at least the flock shall draw them out. And yet Damascus gets destroyed. You know, the first of the nuclear attacks before Babylon destroyed. So here we go. Do you support Israeli plan to nuke Iran? Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene said they are afraid Israeli state will start nuclear war, as this video goes into.
Why can't this president or any president say no to Israel? And we have a right to know why. It's not just because we love Israel and it's the only democracy in the Middle East. And if it is, then our leaders are dumber than we thought they were. But it's probably not that. Because they understand perfectly well how bad this is for the U.S. And there are, believe it or not, a lot of people in the White House who care about the United States. People with power in the White House. They're not all, whatever you think they are, zombies doing Bibi's bidding. Some of them can see very clearly where this is heading. It's heading toward a nuclear strike by Israel on Iran. That's obvious. And that would be a world historic disaster. It's also clearly terrible for the American economy, for the American people, not even to mention the Americans who will die in numbers if this becomes a land war. So there are people working really hard, really late, trying to fix this, to get a peace, even one that diminishes us, where we have to take some lumps. They are doing that. That's the only reason we got to where we were yesterday. It's because people in the White House, taking no credit for it whatsoever, were working to end this, because it's bad. But those people predictably were undercut, our country was undercut by Israel, and there's apparently nothing we can do about it. So again, why is that? And once this is over, even before it ends, every American has a right to know, why does this tiny country have so much control over our government? Is it consent? It doesn't look like it. Now, Joe Kent said point blank when he resigned. And by the way, the day he resigned, he retained highest level security clearance. They tried to tell you, oh, he was a leaker, he was under investigation. It was a lie. They admitted it was a lie. He wasn't under investigation by the FBI. Untrue. And you know it's untrue because he held his security clearance till the day he left the building. So there's no intelligence in the U.S. government that Joe Kent couldn't see. None. He was one of the most informed people in the world, and his conclusion was, there's something weird going on here.
Looking at this, I'm really concerned about Israel or their agents conducting a false flag to blame Iran to legitimize a full war, or nuking, as Michael Savage said today on the show, to get us into full war.
I am afraid, and I'm giving credit to what Michael Savage said and what you have said and others are saying. I fear that we will see a nuclear bomb used on Iran, and I think that probably be the worst thing we could see in our lifetimes, is a nuclear bomb used on anyone. But I think that's where this is headed. I believe that's what Israel wants, and I'm afraid, based on President Trump telling us, watch Mark Levin, and then Mark Levin laying out all the reasons of why nuclear weapons need to be used. I'm truly afraid that this is where it's headed. What you said, Alex, is true. President Trump telling everyone, listen to Mark Levin, and then you have Mark Levin laying out the reasons of why they need to use a nuclear bomb, and he said it was so that it would save American troops' lives. You know what the truth is, Alex? You save American troops' lives by get the hell out of the Middle East. We had no business there to begin with.
I'm really concerned about Israel. Drug us in 39 days ago. I'm concerned about them doing something even bigger to force us into this.
Yeah, and that's prophecy, right? Drawing them in. I mean, he said those words out loud very clearly. That's exactly what the scriptures say that they will do. I mean, again, prophecy speaking in real time. In real time, we're seeing it. We're seeing everything. So, like everything up. Sorry. All right, Israeli missile interceptors have dwindled to the double digits, so they only have hundreds left now. Less than 1,000. They're no longer in the thousands. They're in the hundreds. The decreasing supply of interceptors has left the Israeli state increasingly dependent on the missile defense capabilities of the U.S. Navy. So that's part of another reason, right? The U.S. Navy, and obviously they're not that good because it's obvious that most of the missiles did hit the Israeli state. On the eve of the 10-year ceasefire reached between the U.S. Israeli state and Iran, the number of ballistic missile interceptors left in the Israeli arsenal has dwindled to double digits, according to the Trump administration source with the knowledge of the situation. The critical shortage led Israeli military officials to be significantly more selective when confronting ballistic missile attacks from Iran as well as from Yemen, which recently entered the conflict in a limited fashion. They're having to pick and choose what they shoot down. Right. Referred to the IDF, said White House spokesman, the IDF told job site, "We are checking, but was still working on an answer by the time this article was published, and couldn't estimate when such an answer might come. When it does, we will update this article." So basically, less than 1,000, right? Because that's what it is to be in the hundreds. You're in the hundreds now. Smooch speaks about Israeli intention to expand into Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. So like everything else, though, it's looking like, well, if they can't have Damascus, they'll destroy it. That's what it looks like. You already heard from the other prime minister that was in there before King Bibi came back. Even he said he would wipe Damascus off the face of the map. He had also threatened Turkey as well, that after they're done with Iran, that they would go after Turkey. So like everything else, though, and this is for the Greater Israel Project. Israeli finance minister and settlement official announced that Israeli state intends to expand its borders into the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, and Syria. Well, we already know they've been doing it. There will be a political component in Gaza to expand our borders, another component that will be extended into Lebanon, which they're doing, and what they say defensive boundaries, and a third component that will extend into Syria, ending at the peak of Mount Beit Shean and at least a security zone. This is what is considerable respectable to our neighborhood and what we see needs strengths of security. Bullshit. The West Bank, he said, we are in the final diplomatic stage of the West Bank that would completely eliminate the idea of establishing a Palestinian state. Well, that's actually true, because they're never, ever going to recognize Palestine, even though the rest of the countries do. See, the Israeli state does whatever the fuck they want to with the backing of the U.S. And this, more than anything else, is going to cause them to hate the whore, not to mention Trump's already in the process of dismantling NATO anyways, breaking off from it. Ethiopia army base used to support Sudan parliamentary. So, like everything else, though, you have civil wars over here. And Ethiopia is also very much mentioned in the scriptures as to this third woe that cometh quickly. Better known as the Battle of Gog-Magog, right? The Gog-Magog War, Armageddon, Mountain of Troops, all there in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which would include this area as well. So, it started out with the Gaza getting invaded, right? And then Lebanon getting invaded, then Syria coming down, right? Because remember, Bashar al-Assad was still president when the Gaza invasion happened. But then you saw the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and you've seen the Israeli state take more territory. This was all part of the Israeli plan. Assad's fall, etc. And so you've seen Israeli expansion throughout all this, which led to them attacking Iran. And now you got the Third World War coming quickly. See how that all works? It all ends in a nuclear war. And you see who's going to start it. As both Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene have been saying it, but we know it. We know that the Israeli state draws them out because we have the scriptures. We understand the scriptures. Ethiopian military base close to the Sudanese border is lending support to the Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces, according to research. The Yale School's Public Health and Humanitarian Research Lab said analysis of satellite imagery and open source data shows activity consistent with military assistance to the RSF at an Ethiopian base in Assoa between late December 2025 and late March 2026. The parliamentary group, which has been at war with Sudan's army since April 2023, was accused last month by the Sudanese military of launching drone attacks. Ethiopia denied this claim, also rejected allegations that it is hosting RSF camps. So like everything else, though, you can see, that all these are players in that Third World War. President Peshkian, this is coming from the president of Iran. Iran will never abandon Lebanon in the face of Israeli aggression. And so Beirut really got hit hard yesterday, just totally, because that's what these Israelis do. That's what these fucking goddamn gutter rats do. They throw their temper tantrum and they just continue to attack. I'm surprised they didn't attack Syria. Well, maybe that will come out soon because they say, oh, well, Syria was never a part of the deal. You see how these Zionists work. Renewed aggression by the Zionist regime against Lebanon blatantly violates the initial ceasefire, Pishkin wrote on a post on his X account Thursday. Pakistan has confirmed that Lebanon is included in the ceasefire that was mediated. Israeli states and the U.S., however, claimed the ceasefire did not include Lebanon, with Israeli state announcing it will continue its attacks against the country, and King Baby said that yesterday. So, like everything else, though, you can see whose boot gets kissed in this. It looks to be an AI picture, but nonetheless, he's got to kiss the boot. And hey, man, aren't you fucking tired of this child molester? That's the funny thing, though. Well, we know he's in the work of the Most High, and it's hilarious to see what a cocksucker Esau really is. And it doesn't get any more than DJ Chump, who takes bullshit to Trump shit.
Well, I think we have realized that Iran cannot be conquered. I think that's clear. So if you can't conquer it and you can't get regime change, your best hope is to destroy it and cause society to collapse and hopefully wrest control away from Iran of their oil fields. That's it. That's the best that we can do. And I don't think the rest of the world supports that. But Israel does. Yeah. And that brings us to the real core problem. And this is what most Americans are missing entirely. Why are we doing this? What particular reason is there for us out of the blue to expend all of this time, money, and resources on Iran's destruction? There isn't. There's just nothing strategically to justify it. We're doing it because this is what Israel and its lobby in the United States and the people that back it want. And they happen to own the two houses, the Senate and the House, and they own the White House. And all the key players and advisors who are driving this around Trump, they're effectively agents of the Israel lobby. Supporters of you go to someone like Hegseth. This is a fanatical Zionist Christian, or Christian Zionist, whatever you want to call it. But he's 100% aligned with what Mr. Netanyahu wants. The question has always been, both in Israel and in the United States, is how far is Donald Trump willing to go? And Trump was not willing to attack at the time that we joined the war. Israel had to start it. They started the war, and we were sort of grudgingly dragged into it. I still don't think Trump has his heart in this. I've never believed that he does.
Yep, least the flocks and draw them out.
Bellicose rhetoric, which is what you heard when he threatened the destruction of everything a few days ago. But now he's in a trap of his own making. He's caught up in this escalatory trap. And if you look at the 10 points, how can we possibly accept that unless we are prepared to divorce ourselves from Israel? Because that's what happens.
The most important demand probably is that the United States completely withdraws from the region, like no more bases, no more stationing, no more airfields, and so on. How realistic is that? But not in terms of what the United States wants, but what it still has at the moment. Because actually, Iran attacked a lot of these places, right? The radar stations are gone. A lot of the bases have been attacked. We have reports that thousands of U.S. Personnel were moved out of the region. What do we know about how much U.S. presence there still is in this ring of fire that the U.S. build up around Iran?
Well, we've looked at 27 bases that have been under serious attack by the Iranians, and they are largely unusable. Everything of any real value has been destroyed. Most of the soldiers who were present there, airmen or sailors or Marines, have been withdrawn. Because to leave them there, of course, was to leave them vulnerable to destruction. Now, there still are some in the areas, I'm told. They've moved into local housing areas, into some large-scale hotels, hiding out in the basement or something. But you're hitting on something that's very important. First of all, most Americans didn't even know that we had all these bases. Secondly, the reason those bases were there is because we promised the Gulf states, the GCC, Kuwait, and so forth, that we would protect them. We've now demonstrated that we can't. Warfare has changed. We cannot stop all these missiles from getting through. They bought heavily into our air defense capability. It's had some success, but not as much as they thought it would. So the real question, the third question is, do they really want us to come back? Now, the elites, most of them, these are the very wealthy elites, the ruling elites, which frankly, inside the Arab world, are viewed as kind of an extended Epstein class, corrupt, despicable, decayed. They're in Egypt.
Even Bashar al-Assad was corrupt, by the way.
London. some are in Paris, but they're not living right now in these places. And large numbers of other people have gotten into their cars or trucks or whatever they had, and as I understand it, driven to Riyadh, because from Riyadh you can fly to the Sinai, down at the bottom there, I've forgotten the name of the resort, and from there you can fly to Cairo, and you can either stay in Egypt or fly somewhere else. So I think the real question is, how do we just quietly admit that we can't stay and do much, and how do the elites react to that? Because when I went into the Pentagon during the last sort of 60 to 90 days of the Trump administration, and I began asking, because at the time Donald Trump wanted to find a way to withdraw our forces from Iraq and Syria, not just Afghanistan. And when I kept pushing people, I said, what do we have this base near Al-Tanf for in Syria? And the answer was, for Israel. I said, well, Israel has better intelligence on the region than we do. How can we provide early warning? No, you have to understand, we're there for Israel. And I think the view from Israel and the view from their supporters in Washington is we're in the Gulf for Israel. The question is, can we stay there anymore? I don't think we can. And I think the proverbial handwriting is on the wall. But how does Donald Trump declare victory, look like he's in charge, and do that? So I suspect we may end up with something similar to the end of the 1963 Cuban Missile Crisis, where Kennedy told the Russians, look, you want us to pull our missiles out of Turkey, we'll do that. But we can't do it immediately, because that would upset the political structure and stability here in Washington. They'll say, well, we surrendered. I said, we're not surrendering, but we agree with you. We'll pull our missiles out if you pull those out of Cuba. Khrushchev accommodated us. He pulled his missiles out, and once that had been accomplished, some months later, we quietly withdrew all the missiles from Turkey. So you may see something like that eventually. But Americans must understand that the sticking point is Israel. We have said, number one, no uranium enrichment, because that's what Israel wants. We've said, you've got to dismantle most of your theater ballistic missile arsenal, because that's what Israel demands. And you can't cooperate with anyone in the region that is your quote-unquote partner or ally, because that's what Israel wants. And in addition to this, Israel wants greater Israel. The Israelis have already said, you can have your ceasefire with Iran, okay, we'll pause for 2 weeks, but we're going to continue to attack Lebanon. Iran has said that's unacceptable. That means an inevitable resumption of the conflict. So we're backing the greater Israel project. And if you look at the map, that's very destabilizing to the region. You're turning over half of Syria, or a quarter of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Sinai, and part of the Nile Valley to Israel. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yep. And like everything else, though, that's just it. Kiss his boots. That's what it is. Like the picture shows. And so, this massacre was led yesterday. Survivors recount Israeli massacre against Beirut. From a teenage street vendor to families searching through the rubble, Beirut residents recount how Israeli terror strikes shattered their lives. Yeah, and this is just yesterday on April 8th, or 2 days before, right? A man looked at his wrecked car following the Israeli terror attacks against Beirut on the 8th of April. The first thing Abdul Wahab noticed was the silence after the blast. Then came the smoke, the screams, and the retaliation that the bodies he had pulled from the rubble belonged to the people he knew. It was shortly after 1400 hours Wednesday. Across Lebanon, Israeli warplanes launched heavy wave of airstrikes on densely populated areas, including Beirut and its southern suburbs, the eastern Bekaa governorate, and southern villages. The simultaneously strikes killed more than 300 people and wounded over 1150, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Yeah, where was the Lebanese government even helping? See, Hezbollah is the one that really helps Lebanon. The Israeli aren't, they're the only ones that stand up to the Israeli enemy, besides Iran. The U.S. knew Iran's ceasefire deal included Lebanon. Of course they did, but they're just going to lie about it because, King Bibi and the Israeli state, they do whatever the fuck they want to. New York Times reported that the U.S. had already seen and signed off Sharaf's statement before he posted it. Initial post included a header that said draft Pakistan's Prime Minister on X, causing speculation that the statement was actually written by the U.S. through a White House official denied that President Trump drafted it. Vance claimed it was a misunderstanding on the part of the Iranians that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and said it would be done for Tehran to allow the negotiations to collapse over the issue. Well, Iran never turned their back against Lebanon, unlike the Lebanese government that's been sucking up to the Israeli state, because they won't fight for them because they're really a part of the Israeli state. So the real government of Iran, the only one that's functional, is Hezbollah. The rest are all Zionists, and they are all caving into the Israeli state because they are the Israeli state. Lebanese civilians killed in an Israeli massacre. A doctor, journalists, and students are among the hundreds killed in the heaviest single day of bombing in Lebanon. Since U.S. President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran on Tuesday, Israeli state responded by launching its deadly strikes on Lebanon. Israeli Defense Minister Katz said in a video statement on Thursday that more than 200 were eliminated, because the only terrorists are the Israelis. But, you get the idea, so you can see that, this person was a presenter and reporter at the privately owned Sat Al-Farah radio station, killed in an Israeli strike on her home in the southern city of Saur. She doesn't pose any threat. This one is a journalist with Al-Manar TV channel. Does this sound familiar? They've been killing reporters right and left in Gaza, too. And in Syria, for that matter. And this one was a poet and researcher killed along with her husband Mohammed by a strike in central Beirut. Her death was announced by the American University in Beirut. The list goes on. These were high school students in Kafat killed in Israeli strikes. She was killed by an Israeli strike, Kafu, when it hit the pharmacy where she works. So this is just a pharmacist. These are real people with real names and real stories, but that's what Esau is. He's a terror to the world. And like everything else, though, it is the Most High, Yahweh, that's going to send Yahawashi and the angels to finally put Esau down. But first it's going to stir up all the nations come into that valley. And that valley, you already see where it is. The Valley of Jehoshaphat's right there in the region. Better known as West Asia. Moscow backs Tehran on status of Lebanon and U.S.-Iran deal. Moscow believes that the U.S. ceasefire has regional dimension and extends to Lebanon, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said. So no Israeli expansion, pretty much. No Israeli bombardments. Pretty much the Israelis have to cease and desist. You think that's going to work? No. Russia's going to eventually have to intervene. Sergei Lavrov told his Iranian counterpart Agashi on a phone call on Thursday, according to Rita. Lavrov stated that Russia fully supports the cessation of hostilities between the U.S., Iran, and Israel's accession to those agreements. He expressed hope for the success of upcoming negotiations, reaffirmed Moscow's readiness. See, like everything else, though, right now Russia's just playing the part of, trying to go for diplomacy, go for, easing tensions, etc. But like everything else, though, they're going to be drawn into the war. The Lisa Flock is going to draw them into the war because they're going to have to protect the weak. As the scriptures tell us. Turkey urges global response to Israelis' potential acts of sabotage amid ceasefire in Mideast. So, actually, Turkey was against that because, like everything else, they've been calling for an end to the war, too. Saying that this has got to stop, because, there's fire everywhere. So, even Turkey has condemned the Israeli actions. So, you can see where Turkey is going to be on the side of Russia and the rest. Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan on Thursday called on the international community to be ready to respond appropriately to Israeli potential acts of sabotage amid the recently declared U.S.-Iran ceasefire. We also hope for the establishment of a new security and peace architecture in the region, including the normalization of relations between Iran and the Gulf countries on a stronger foundations. As Turkey, I would like to reiterate that we are ready to play an active role in the process to provide all necessary support, Fidan said during a joint news conference with his Syrian counterpart, Assad Hassan al-Shalani. Biden warned that Tel Aviv is now extending its genocide against Gaza to Lebanon. And you know that they've been attacking Syria too, even before the ink on the ceasefire had dried. Israeli attacks against Lebanon carried out without distinction between children and civilians. Noting that the 2-week temporary ceasefire between D.C. and Tehran may not be sufficient, Biden said it could be extended if both sides agree. So, like everything else, though, that also caused the Strait of Hormuz to be closed again. I mean, that got closed. And then the ones that can get through, of course it's going to be a toll. And Trump's like, oh no, I'm not going to pay any toll because he thinks everything is free. And this war for him has been fun. It's been a lot of fun for him. So he's having fun with it, you know, because that's what he wants to do. So we could see that indeed the ceasefire, well, then comes sudden destruction, right? So I think I'll just get that one. Yeah, here it is. Because there's a so-called peace agreement, but you know that all peace agreements get broke. You know? Trying to find it. Okay, so I ended up here. It is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. I don't know why it took me there, but nonetheless, though, I found it. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. And ultimately, what's that talking about? That's talking about just being further and further dragged into the war. All the peace efforts just blown to shit. Like, you know, Lebanon getting invaded, you know. Damascus, you know, falling, etc. You know, supposed to be in the middle of peace, and then all of a sudden this war comes out, right? But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. And what's that talking about? The day of destruction, the day of the Lord, Yahweh Hashem, Yahawashi. You are the children of the light and the children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. So in other words, we're watching, seeing what's going on, but we know what's about to take place, and that destruction is coming, you know, and before that day comes, of course, the MOTB has to be mandated, but it definitely, they're going to always talk about peace, and next thing you know, this day overtakes. We're already in World War III, as you've already guessed. I mean, it's been that way for a while, but we saw how the war got started, you know, and where it started, and who started it. The Israeli state, the lethal flock. That's what the scriptures told us, so we're seeing it in real time. So hopefully all this has been edifying. Then I will say, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahawashi, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, Wa Abal Babal. Rakatam, Jehovah elect, Shalom.